Hi, this is Shelley Zalis, and I'm the CEO of the Female Quotient. And today's conversation really is about shattering the glass in tech. And I am about to introduce three badass women who truly, in my opinion, are shattering the glass. And I'm going to ask you to tell me who you are, what you do, and if you have shattered the glass and how. For me, personally, I think I've shattered the glass because I am also well known as the chief troublemaker, and I tend to break all the rules that make no sense and create the ones that do, so that I personally could thrive in the workplace and be the person that I am today. So welcome, I'm so happy that we are all here together, and thank you to Deloitte and to Google Cloud for hosting this conversation. Tell me who you are, what you do, and have you shattered the glass, in your opinion?
So my name is Mai Dawn, and I lead our strategic partner marketing team here on the Google Cloud side. Have I shattered the glass? I'm not quite sure. We talked about it, and I think I need to own up to the fact that I have. I am a female, I am a woman.
I think that's amazing, and as we were just having a little conversation before we went live, you started talking about it's a little hard sometimes to talk about yourself. And you know, when I said you are shattering the glass and you are a woman in leadership and in a tech industry, that's pretty remarkable considering that less than 17% of leaders are women today, and even less than that in the technology space. Do you find it hard to talk about yourself?
I do find it hard to talk about myself. Earlier we were talking is, you know, the way I was raised in my household, it was very much as a female and as an Asian. In my household, I was taught to be soft-spoken, speak when spoken to, not stand out in the crowd. And so it was very, very hard to put myself out there. And it's something that I constantly struggle with. And so when you ask me that question, have I shattered the glass? I'm not quite sure. And I feel that way just because, again, you know, growing up, it was like, you're not good enough or you're not the best yet.
So we're going to do it again, and when we do it again, I'm going to say, have you shattered the glass? And you'll go, yes, I have.
Yes, I have.
Awesome. We're owning it.
Hi, well, I'm really honored to be here. I am Judith Williams. I am the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for SAP. I am a Senior Vice President and the Head of People Sustainability at SAP, and I've been in my role for about 6 months. And when you asked me that question, Shelley, I thought to myself, well, no, I'm still on my journey. And I think sometimes in HR, we feel like we are working so hard to make the culture better for other women, other people of color, other underrepresented groups, that we don't necessarily think about our own success. And so I think a lot of the way I look at breaking the glass ceiling is, what have I done for all of the women and all of the people of color to think about, you know, when there's a hole in that glass ceiling, it will be much more than 17%. We need to be at parity.
Well, I think also, you know, it's not about breaking the glass, it's about shattering the glass. And at some point, not even having a glass to have to shatter is the day that we will really be truly living in a diverse, inclusive, and equal world. So let's get to that faster and sooner all together.
Yeah,
farther and faster
goal.
together.
Absolutely.
Which will be amazing.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Lisa Noon. I am a Managing Director in the Cloud Engineering Organization, one of the global leads in the Google Cloud practice here. Yes, I have shattered. I've been at this many, many years, though. I will say there's a lot less glass on the floor than there used to be, which I'm really thankful for. The number 17% stands out, but I can say that when I started in this business a few decades ago, we were lucky to have 17% total. I mean, women versus men in IT. You know, I can recall being in meetings where we'd walk in, large meetings, and there'd be 30, 40 people, and we're the only woman, right? Or much less a person of color, or, you know, other underrepresented minorities. So yeah, I mean, I think certainly things have changed. We've seen demonstrable change. We continue to make progress, and we need to make more progress, but this is great. And I'm grateful to have a platform like this with you guys to talk more about it.
Okay, so where did your bravery come from? I mean, getting into, especially a woman in the technology field, you know, we start 50-50 in the workplace in general in most industries.
Right.
We start a lot lower, obviously, in tech. What was that impetus? What was that moment of truth where you just said, well, I don't mind being the minority in the room, being surrounded by, you know, men in the boys club, I'm going to go for it. Where did that bravery come from?
Well, I know for me, as a young black girl growing up, I was always very driven. by education and also by my family background. My parents, or my grandparents who raised me, are Jamaican immigrants, and they really pushed me very hard. And so I was always the only person like me in the room.
Share the story about your parents and your grandparents and what they would say to you.
So my grandparents, no matter what I brought home, if I brought home a 98, they would be like, how did you miss that question? Or if I came in second, they'd be like, you know, that's first loser. And even if I won, like I used to run track, and they'd be like, yeah, but it's just running, isn't it? And so I was always pushed. And so there were never any limits to what I was supposed to be capable of. And I think that really helped me. At the time, it was often very stressful. There was a lot of pressure. But now I don't look for limits. I look for possibilities. And I think about, well, wherever I am, how can I be better? Where can I go next?
And I think it's just so important when you talked about the possibilities. Oftentimes we get defensive because we look at what's wrong or what's not or no versus the positive, proactive solutions, you know, with progress and the possibilities versus the impossibilities. I think that's really important. Did you grow up in that same culture of, you know, 98 is not good enough?
I did, and I think, you know, it was always 98 wasn't good enough. If I brought home an A, why wasn't an A+? It was something that made me more driven than anything else to say, how do I find the way? How do I prove you wrong? How do I step out of this and actually drive things more forward? And so it was really, for me, I took it as a challenge than anything else to say, how do I prove you wrong? How do I do it better? And really, you know, show to my parents that I can do it.
Yeah, I would say my mother was really an inspiration to me. I mean, in her generation, and she was an example in her family. Her brothers got to go to college, and she went to secretarial school, right? And she was a very intelligent woman, and I think she always carried a little bit of a chip on her shoulder because of that, instilled in me the belief that it was ridiculous, right? And so always encouraging, you know, would always go to bat for me, give me coaching, tell me to just go for it. And also gave me some advice early on in my career that I'm responsible for my career. Don't let anyone else take that from me.
I love that.
And don't be afraid to ask for what you want, and you earn it, so you're entitled to it. Go for it. And that kind of, you know, think's carried me through my whole career, and I've done much better for it.
Well, I think also, you know, if you don't ask, you don't know. The worst thing that could happen is a no. The best thing that could happen is a yes. So, you know, when you think back at some icons, some women that have made such an incredible difference in history, that have either been written out of history or forgotten in history until we watched the film Hidden Figures. And Ada Lovelace in the 1800s was a woman in math.
That's right.
And Katherine Johnson, a black woman who created the first trajectory to the moon for Alan Shepard, like inspiring in math. They didn't have, I don't think, classic mentors in those days, or, you know, people to turn to get their wisdom, their confidence, their advice. Did you have mentors in your life, male, female, whatever it was? Who were they, and were they like you, or were they different? Where did your inspiration come from, and where does it continue to come from?
You know, an example I have is actually an executive that I worked for during my time at VMware, where I worked for an executive. He led VP of channels, and you know, he was really great and showed me the way to raise my hand for something, because at the time he wanted to hire somebody to be a director of partner programs for distribution. I didn't say anything. A year later I came to him and said, I want to do something different. He said, I shared that opportunity with you and you didn't raise your hand. Because at the time I thought, oh, well, if I was good enough, he would have given it to me. And in reality, he wanted me to raise my hand. I wanted to see that I wanted it. And so I learned from that moment on that, hey, I need to toot my own horn, raise my hand, make that ask, because the worst that can happen is they say no.
You know, it's just, did you see the Ruth Bader Ginsburg film? Obsessed. And what she says is you need to know your value, right? Own your ambition and stand in your power. And the two taboo words that women never use is money and power. And really being able to ask for what they want and know what they're worth. So I'm very happy that you had that lesson early on. I think that's very important. Mentors, role models, sponsors.
So I've had a really different way of coming into the corporate world. I started out as a college professor. I ended up
Teaching what?
I taught, my degree is in theater and performance studies, so I've taught history, I've taught drama, I've taught an English department, I've taught in a great books course, I've taught a lot of different things. And I realized that academia was never going to make me happy. And I had a dissertation advisor when I was at Stanford, and he was always super supportive of me, despite the fact that I abandoned the profession and I went on to do things that to him were just absurd. He was like, he didn't actually understand some of the choices, but he was always a real advocate for me and continues to be an advocate for me. So I think that he, early on, having that relationship was really important. And then when I got to Dropbox, that was my first role where I was leading a function. And I had a peer who was leading internal communications. And the relationship that we developed was actually really amazing because it was great to have someone who was at the same stage, but who was a white male and who was negotiating things differently. And we would point out the absurdities of his experience and my experience. And we ended up having a really great peer mentoring relationship that continues. So I think that sometimes you'll have someone that's senior to you that can really have an impact on your career, but other times you'll have someone who is just that advocate for you in the room, that ally in the moment that you need.
I actually think the best sponsors and mentors are ones that are not like you, that are different than you. Were you going to jump in?
No, I was going to say I fully agree with that statement. And actually, one thing that resonated with me that you said earlier, I was having this discussion with someone, is that being able to have someone who actually promotes you when you're not in the room as well. I mean, it's one thing to encourage you to self-promote yourself, but also too, when you're not in the room, they're your advocate. They're promoting you as well to other peers.
What about you, Lisa?
Yeah, I would say being the one of 50 or one of more than 50, in certain situations can actually work in your advantage. And I'll give you an example. I volunteered, raised my hand too, right? For the work that no one else seemed to want to do. I worked for a bank in the U.S. that was acquired by a bank in Hong Kong, and no one really was. I volunteered. I'll go. So I went over there, and this is the late 80s, and walking around the floor in a Hong Kong bank as a 20-plus-year-old blonde American woman, I certainly got noticed, right? Because I stood out. Back to the mentoring point, one of the gentlemen there, very senior leader in the bank, wanted to know who that person was, and so I had an audience with him, and it turned out that he had 4 daughters. Right, and so he got behind me in my career. He looked out for me through thick and thin. He advocated for me. He was kind of quietly there, but even years later, after I left the bank, if I had a good day, reach out to him, a bad day, and thank God that I had him throughout. But it was amazing.
That's amazing. And I often say our differences are our greatest strengths.
Yeah.
If we own them. And hold them. So let's talk about our differences, as women in technology. Do you feel that, women are bringing a different perspective to the table? And if so, what is that? Why do we need more women in tech? It's a nice to have, of course. We believe in equality, but, do you see that we are bringing a different perspective, and what is it, and how is it making the table better?
Sorry for jumping in, but it's not just women, it's diversity in general. And internationalization, we can pull from 21 time zones, and the ideas that you get on the table, even through VC, you don't know what the person looks like on the other end of the phone. It doesn't matter anymore. It's just very inclusive and collaborative, and the creativity when you can put all different people together with all different backgrounds is really astounding.
And I think we solve the problems that we have. And so we all have blind spots when it comes to thinking about, well, what are the problems that we want to solve? What are the problems that our organization should solve? How should we solve them? And when we have people from different backgrounds, they're going to approach that problem in different ways. And having that kind of creative disagreement so that you come out with a better product or service is really important. And I think that if we leave the building of technology to just one small sector of the population, then we're not building a future for everyone. And ultimately, that's what we're doing in tech. I think that's what makes it so exciting, is that opportunity to craft the future. So let's make sure that we do that for everyone.
I think also there's such a talent war now, especially for tech positions across the board, and from entry level, obviously, through leadership to shatter the glass, back to shattering the glass. How do you feel it's the best way to compete to get the best talent? I mean, there's so few women in tech, and if we want more women and we want more diversity, how are each of your companies, what's your strategy for winning the talent war and really bringing the best, not just the available, to the table and helping them rise the ranks?
I wish we would get away from this talent war that we're competing for talent, because I think what we really all want to do is make the pie bigger so that there is more talent. Right? We need to invest early so that we're not moving around the chairs on the Titanic where SAP hires from Google, Deloitte hires from SAP. We don't want to do that. We want to have more opportunity.
So how do we expand that opportunity? Let's go to that. And I read a great book, and it was just so true. It was called Red Ocean, Blue Ocean. Did you read that? Red Ocean is, the pool is so limited, we have to compete with one another and the water gets bloody, right? Blue Ocean is exactly, as you said, expand the pool. And let's figure out how to expand it so we're all looking at the blue ocean with new opportunities and not just, stealing share from one another. So how do we expand? How do we create the blue ocean?
I think what we need to be doing is actually doing a lot more coaching, mentoring than anything else, because I think that's the only way you're going to add more chairs is to actually do a lot more coaching and mentoring and bringing on people who have raw talent that you can cultivate and develop over time. Because I think, again, we don't want to move the decks on the chair or the chairs on the deck, but we absolutely want to make sure that we are investing in more people than anything else and cultivating and developing folks to really build that talent pool.
I completely agree, right, with the points that you all just made. I will say, just to get kind of specific, I've seen some great success, really encouraging success around the women coding scholarships. Phenomenal. Love to see more of that, encourage that, look for sponsors at some of the events we host to go in with sponsorships for us. I volunteer at Girls Who Code local events, and just kind of being out there and setting an example is another one. Deloitte's had an interesting program lately, the Cloud Returnship Program, for women who, for whatever reason, personal, family, have left the workforce and now want to re-enter. Just a facilitated program for them to come back in with 12 to 16 weeks of training and then mentoring and kind of job placement as they get back into the workforce again. And I think those kinds of programs, you guys could probably suggest a few more. It really should start to move the needle over time.
That's fantastic. Okay, so we just have one quick lightning round and then it's a wrap, unfortunately, because I could continue to have this conversation. It's just so fascinating. What would you say your best leadership quality is?
I would say that my best leadership quality is that I'm a big picture person. I have systems thinking, and I'm able to take pieces of information and pull them together very closely to then think about how do you deploy a solution. So that's probably what I do best.
For me, I think it's coaching and developing. It's one of my favorite things to do, is being able to take people and actually coach them, guide them, give them advice, and watch them bloom than anything else. It's my favorite thing to do.
I think for me, I like to try and create a steady state vision. I'm always a why person. I'll do anything if I understand why I'm doing it, if it makes sense to me, and what kind of the long-term goals are. So tactics in the face of strategy. So I, throughout my career, have tried to really be consistent in that regard.
Well, I think what is just very clear, thank you for joining us today, is that what we need for the most successful leaders and to shatter that glass is inclusive leadership with an inclusive mindset, and not just the hard skills, but also the soft skills that we talk about, that soft power, the masculine, decisive, aggressive, analytic, the feminine, emotive, nurturing, empathetic, contextual, visual. And I think when we combine both, we are certainly better together. So thank you so much for joining today.